Hey guys, welcome to my slowly diminishing office. Slowly unpacking things up and getting rid of things. It's just gonna be a little bit of chaos for the next month. So today I wanted to talk about some fantasy book recommendations. I started really diving into my fantasy era last fall. I'd read some fantasy before that, enjoyed some, but not just loved the genre like I'm doing right now. So I did a video at the beginning of this phase and realized I forgot a bunch of books because I was just looking at my bookshelf and I wasn't looking at all the library books or ebooks or audiobooks that I've read that are fantasy that are great. So for me, what I like to see in fantasy, I feel like it's quite a range, but I really like my fantasy books to be clean. And by that I mean little to no language and no open door scenes. Like Divine Rivals was almost a 5-star book for me, and then right at the end, in the last 5 or 10%, there's an open door scene that really turns me off. So I like to keep things clean and, I don't know, twists and turns. Like I said, there's a variety here. I'm going to be covering lots of subgenres of fantasy. I want to do a video soon of some great science fiction recommendations because I also really like the science fiction genre. I've loved it for longer than I've loved fantasy, but lately I've been reading mostly fantasy, although some science fiction, and there are some books where I feel like the line is a little bit more blurred, like they could be kind of in both categories. So what generally works best for me is if I go over the books that I don't own first so I don't forget them, and then I'll get into the ones that I own. So the first one, I can't believe I forgot this on my list last time, you guys. Tress of the Emerald Sea. How did I forget that one? This was the first of Sanderson's secret projects last year, so I think it came out January 1st, and I loved it. This is slightly science fiction-esque, I guess, too. But him and his wife were watching The Princess Bride, and she was like, what if the woman didn't stay back and actually went to look for the man? And I'm not a Princess Bride fan. Sorry if you're gonna click off now. I don't like the movie, I don't like the book. But I really loved Tress. So in this one we follow Tress. The love of her life goes away. I can't remember why he went away, but on some kind of adventure, and something happens and he doesn't return. So instead of waiting at home for him, she goes to go find him. And now the Emerald Sea, the seas in this book are not water seas. They're I think it's spores. And I kind of just imagine it's the ships are in the bubbles from bubble tea. That's kind of what I imagine it. I don't know if I'm right or not. So we only got the ebook versions of the secret projects. Being in Canada, shipping was it was hard to justify, but this is one that I really want to own a physical copy of because it was my favorite of the secret projects. That being said, I still haven't read The Sunlit Man, so maybe that one will trump it, but I don't think so. Next is one I actually just finished this morning. It's called Saints and Monsters. So in this one we follow Mira. She is the second daughter in this family where the queendom is passed down. So it's not a kingdom, it's a queendom. She has the blue sickness, so her hair is blue, and she also has a crooked spine, and it is seen as a sign of weakness. So right at the beginning of the book, it's the day before her sister is supposed to take the queendom, her older sister, and something goes wrong. Her sister ends up getting poisoned and put into a sleep, and Mira is going to do whatever it takes to heal her sister and save the queendom. And this book took a lot of twists and turns. I really enjoyed it. This is by Quill and Flame publisher. This is the first book that I've read that they've published. The author is Ellen McGinty though, but Quill and Flame is all about publishing. They have a little slogan, heat without the scorch. Yes, there it is. That sounds good. So I want to check out more of their books because I really enjoyed Saints and Monsters. Next up is A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking. I must not have read this one before my other video because I pretty much talked about it nonstop after I read it. So it's kind of, I don't know what age group it's made for. I don't think it's middle grade, but our main character is 14, so that always kind of messes with me. It's probably YA. It's definitely got some dark themes, even though it's also kind of like a cozy fantasy book. So we have our main character, whose name I forget because I'm always so bad at it. She is what she considers a minor wizard. Her magic has to do with baking. She can infuse magic into baking and make things like not burn. She can like sometimes make little gingerbread cookies like dance for a little bit. You know, she can make dry things kind of come back and have like not be stale anymore. Something that would come in handy in everyday life, but not like something you'd be really proud to be a wizard in. Like, I get that. But the minor wizards in her city seem to be slowly getting killed off or disappearing. And so she's a little concerned about that. And right at the beginning of the book, like the very first page, she walks into the bakery where she works and there's a dead body on the floor. And it turns out it's a minor wizard. And she's worried that maybe she's going to be targeted next. So things ensue. And the book, it is cozy, but it's also like really deep and kind of dark in a good way. Like, I feel like the light triumphs over the darkness, but sometimes it's good to have that darkness so that the light, you can really see the light. I still have yet to read any T. Kingfisher since reading that book, but I keep meaning to because I really enjoyed it. A Sanderson book I don't own is Warbreaker, and it is my favorite Sanderson standalone. One of my favorite, I don't know, like it might be my favorite Sanderson book, honestly. And the only reason I don't own it is because anytime I see it on like Amazon, it's always the mass market paperback and I want like the bigger copy. And so I've just stayed away from owning it. Now it's been years since I've read it, but this is one where our main character is supposed to go, not our main character, her sister is supposed to go to the city and marry the king or the prince or something, but she goes in her place. And of course, like with Sanderson, the magic system is complex and yet also kind of makes sense. Now, because it's been so many years since I read it, I'm probably not remembering half the stuff, but it's one of those books where it's like the book is quite political, which would normally be an anti-buzzword for me, but I really enjoyed it in this one. Yeah, I don't know if I have much more to say about it because I don't remember all the details, but I do know that out of all the ones I've read, it's at least one of my favorites, possibly my very favorite. And I'm very sad that a sequel to that, which he left open, even though he wrote this many years ago, like that's still like one of his lower priorities. Most people, I think he's writing an Elantris sequel or companion novel or something here shortly, and I wish it was Warbreaker instead. Even though I've enjoyed all of his other books. Two more that I don't own. One is the legendary Inga. So in this one, why do I keep saying in this one? Okay, whatever. In this book, we have Inga. She is in the forest. I can't remember what she's doing, like hunting or chopping trees. She's doing something. And this monster kind of ravages the castle. Is it a dragon? Is it a monster? I'm not sure. And it comes into the forest where she is, and she slays the beast. And she gets taken back to the castle and kind of is thought to be a hero. The only thing is, she is dressed up as a boy for some reason. I don't really know why. And so the king decides, like, you are gonna marry my daughter. Thank you for killing this thing that has ravaged our kingdom. I'm gonna give you my daughter as a prize. And she's like, well, that doesn't work because I'm actually a girl, not a guy. And for some reason, the king pretends like he doesn't hear her, or like everyone is just convinced somehow that she's a guy. It's kind of hilarious. And so she has to stay in the castle and is almost kind of like a prisoner because she's, yeah. So things unfold. And this is one that I wish so much had a prettier cover because I would really like to own it, but I kind of don't like the cover at all. So that's too bad. But I had so much fun with this book. Okay, the last one. This I read a long time ago. I remember Murphy Napier talking about this series, and I think this was before I started booktube because I watched her for a while before I started booktube. She was the only one that I knew was here. So she talked about the series a lot. The first book is Duel of Fire, And I read, I think, the first 3 in the series. I don't know how many there is, like 5 or 6 or something. And I feel like they kind of just like slowly go downhill. But book 1 was really good. Book 2 I think was quite good. And then book 3 was kind of like meh. And then I just stopped. So this is a world where magic is like the different elements. So Duel of Fire has to do with fire. And the main character in that book, I think her family, oh, how did this work? I think her family historically had the power of fire, or the magic ability, something to do with fire, but she didn't get it for some reason. And then somehow she like does fencing, like sword fencing. She becomes the trainer for the prince, and that's where I'll leave it because I don't really remember much more. But I remember flying through that book and getting really excited to read book 2. And then it kind of like slowly fizzled. But check out the series. I wouldn't mind like revisiting it because that was in a season when I wasn't really reading any fantasy anyway. So I think I would probably enjoy it more now. Okay, I think that was the last on my list that I don't own. Just double checking. Yes, I think the rest of them are right here in front of me. Oh, and one that I finished this month. I finished this right at the beginning of the month. Blood of the Stars by Karen Norton. I so enjoyed this book. So this one, we have 2 main characters. We have a girl young woman who has some kind of magic, but her guardians are using it against her. So they like bleed her for her magic. And she is trying to find a artifact or something like that to try to help her get home. And then we've got the prince of the area who is looking for this woman. He saw her disappear years before and has been looking for her. So it's a cool map of the kingdom. This kingdom has, or this world has different kinds of magic, and it's got like a wheel of magic. So different people have like different spokes of magic. The prince can go to like an area and feel the memories of the people that have been there previously, or even like be around someone and get into their memories. So some people have like some, yeah, just different types of magic. This was a wild ride. To me, this in some ways, and like it's not even similar at all, so I don't know why, but it did remind me of the Stormlight Archive, but not quite so intense. Like I would consider this like the Stormlight Archive light, but not because the storylines are the same at all. I don't know, it sucked me in, really enjoyed it. Oh, and then we have a third main character too, who we don't really find out a whole lot about, but she's a little bit of like an anomaly for some reason. We know there's something more going on with her than what we're getting. She seems to be really old, like older than she should be, and things are going on there. Yeah, I'll leave it at this. This book 1 is the only one that is out so far, but I'm definitely going to be continuing with this series. And speaking of like Stormlight Archive light, this book is under 700 pages, so that's like half of a Stormlight Archive book. This book I read a couple months ago and loved. I did not realize, you know, sometimes when you go into a book and you don't know what you're getting into, even if you have read the back. I just didn't realize I was gonna love this one so much. So this is The Light Between Worlds. I would say this is like pretty much like the lowest as far as fantasy goes here, because it's kind of like Narnia-esque. We have siblings that transport into a different world during World War II, and really this book takes place 6 years later, after they've been back for a few years. We do flip back and forth between kind of like present day-ish, which is 6 years after the other timeline, which is when they're in this like woodlands. So our main character in here, she never felt more at home than she did in the woodlands, and she is always wanting to go back. This book goes so heavy, like it talks a lot about depression in such a really good way. Like I feel like I've read some books before that try to tackle the topic of depression and just seem to fail miserably, and our main character is usually comes across as really self-centered. I think it takes a skilled person to do it well, and I feel like it's done really well in here because I find I was rooting for our main character and like my heart was breaking for her. So we flash back and forth between her more like present day chapters and then the time in the woodlands for half of it, and then the second half things change, but I don't want to say anything because that would kind of be spoilery. Highly recommend this one. Six Crimson Cranes was one of my first books in my fantasy period last fall. This is an Asian like folk tale, fairy tale-esque kind of retelling. I think Six Crimson Cranes is the title of it. So in this one we follow Shiori. She is the princess of a kingdom, and for some reason, oh yeah, she has magic, but she hasn't told anyone that she has magic. The morning of her wedding, her magic is like, I don't know, it's very powerful. And in order to try to hide it, she runs away from her wedding. And she ends up getting banished from her kingdom. And she kind of gets cursed. She has a, there's a bug on my window and I can't tell if it's inside or outside. Hopefully outside. She pretty much has like a bowl on her head. And I never did quite understand this because it sounds like she can see people. So I don't know if she can see this bowl, but people can't like see her face. And it's stuck there. Plus, she's lost her voice. And so she needs to try to find her brothers who also disappeared when she was banished. And so this is her trying to find her way home and find her brothers, all while being voiceless and having this ridiculous bowl stuck to her head, or like hat bowl thing. I don't really know what it is. So I haven't read book 2. I know some people have not enjoyed it as much, and I do this often with books. Like sometimes I feel like it ends pretty well and I don't feel the need to read more. This one definitely, like, you can tell there's a second book, but I haven't been motivated to try it out, so maybe I will at some point. Next up is My Plain Jane. This is a alternate history fantastical play on Jane Eyre. So Jane Eyre is one of our main characters. Charlotte Bronte is one of our main characters. And a guy named Alex? Yes, Alex. So Jane Eyre in here has grown up in an orphanage, and then she becomes a governess. Now the thing is, when Jane was younger at the orphanage, she had a friend named Helen. Helen ended up dying, so this kind of like takes some of like Charlotte Bronte's history in. Like there's lots of little elements from Charlotte Bronte and Jane Eyre and stuff coming in here. Helen died, and then ever since then Jane can see ghosts, and this is in a world where they have like people that specifically are ghost hunters and trap ghost spirits. And Alex is one of those people. So Jane goes and works at Thornfield, as she does in Jane Eyre, falls for Mr. Rochester, but he's hiding a secret, as in Jane Eyre. Yeah, and I don't know if I want to say much more. It takes a lot of elements from Charlotte Bronte's life and the Jane Eyre story, and then throws some fantasy of some ghosts in there. And I had a lot of fun with this. Unfortunately, I've tried a couple other books. The third Jane book and the first Mary book have been no-goes for me for certain reasons, but I enjoyed My Lady Jane and this one. Another book I loved is Mortal Queens by Victoria McCombs. So this is the first book. I keep forgetting if this is a duology. I feel like it's a duology. It might be longer. The title for the next book was just announced like a week or two ago, and I can't remember what it was, but it was really good. And I was going to continue it anyway, but like after that I really wanted to. So in this one we have the human kingdom that I think is made up of 5 or so different islands, and on the center island one girl is chosen each year to become the queen of the Fae people. So they like pull a name out of the hat. She goes with the Fae, who come once a year to be their queen. And of course our main character, whose name is Thea, she becomes the mortal queen. And when she gets to the Fae realm, she realizes there's a lot more going on than what she thought. Like, they thought it was really, you know, like honoring to be a mortal queen. But the mortal queens never come back. And she's realizing there's some sketchy things going on. And this book was a fun ride. After I read it, I was just a little annoyed because I have to wait for the next one. But it was announced that it's actually coming out later this year. So book 1 came out in February, and I think book 2 is coming out in November. So I don't have to wait much longer, but I want to read it as soon as I can. Okay, the next one is House of Salt and Sorrows. The only thing I wish I would have known when I was reading this is that it is a fantasy thriller. So it has like slightly different vibes than your normal fantasy, and I kept feeling like it was a little different, but I couldn't put my finger on it until, I don't know, I read somewhere about it being a fantasy thriller, and I was like, oh, that's what I was feeling. So I haven't read book 2 yet, but this is 12 Dancing Princesses retold. They live in a world or a kingdom where when people die, they put their bodies back into the sea, into the salt. And our main character, she is a little worried. Her family has been called cursed. I can't remember how many, before the book starts, like 3 or 4 out of the 12 girls have already died. And she's worried, at least the last one was not like an innocent death, like there was murder or something sketchy going on. And then she's wondering if the other ones, if there was more going on, and also wondering who's going to be next. She is really suspicious, and things unfold throughout the book. So it's fantasy, but it's also a thriller. So, and it's a fairy tale retelling. It's got lots going on, and it was good. I'm looking forward to book 2, although I hear that one might not be as good. Next up is a series that is all short little novellas, like I think under 200 pages. Yeah, this one's just barely. Wormwood Abbey. So this is the Secrets of Ormdale series. I've read book 1 and 2 and thoroughly enjoyed them. They're Victorian era fantasy, gothic elements kind of stories. So we've got Edith. Unbeknownst to most people other than like her immediate family, she is a mystery writer, novelist, which is very weird for the time. And right at the beginning of the book, her father inherits his childhood home, which he thinks when he was a kid he saw a dragon in the garden. And it becomes apparent pretty quickly that there is something of the sort going on in this place. It's a short little book, so I don't want to say too much, but I enjoyed book 1 and book 2 and plan on continuing the series. Okay, next we've got The Orb and the Airship. I read this one a couple months ago and just got book 2 in. So this is set, so we are like steampunk fantasy. We've got a main character who is going off to like university. We've got a main character who is a airship pirate, and we've got a wizard who was in a tower for a couple hundred years and didn't realize what was all going on around him. So our main character Graydon is taking a sky ship, I think they're called, to university when it gets attacked by pirates, our other main character, and lots of things happen. For me, I really enjoyed the second half. Like I felt like the book really got going then. So if you start it and you're like feeling a little bogged down in the first half, okay, press on, because it gets really good and I'm curious to see where the series continues. Book 3 just came out, I think a couple months ago, recently, or is about to. So I plan on continuing. I'm going to be reading book 2 pretty soon. And my last one, I'll see if I can do this before my battery dies. We've got Defy the Night. This is also a duology. Also, I've only read book 1 so far, but I own book 2, so I will get to it. This one we have 2 main characters. We have Tessa, who is an apothecary apprentice, and at night she illegally goes and makes an antidote for this virus or thing that is spreading through the kingdom. Some kind of sickness is spreading. And then we have the Prince Korik is our other main character, and him and his brother are partly why the kingdom is doing so poorly. But years before, their parents were assassinated, and they have this kind of like idea that they need to show a strong front so they don't end up like their parents, who were nice but just dead. So they've been really harsh to the kingdom. And yeah, I don't know how much more to say other than that. Things happen. I'm very curious to see if book 2 is as good as book 1, because I really enjoyed this and flew through it. Okay, so that is all for my fantasy recommendations for now. At this point, I'll have another wrap up like this in 6 months. Let me know if there are any fantasy books that you really enjoy that are kind of in the same veins, so you think I'll like them. Definitely bonus points if they are clean and yeah, just kind of have some of the same feels as this. And if you guys are interested in like other bookish specific genre, of course, now I got cut off. If you're looking for similar bookish genre recommendations, let me know in the comments and I will try to work on creating those soon. I feel like in the next month and a half, videos are gonna be a little weird here because I'm packing up books. So I'm just going to be making whatever videos I can or have time for, but I always love to hear what you guys want to see. Thanks for hanging out with me today.